Welcome back to At Best Mediocre, where we are tryhards at video games and training, but really we're just having fun getting beat up. Today so last night I got this message from a friend of mine that I haven't seen or spoken to in a few years now. And I was going to talk about rivals again today, but this really became top of mind, so I wanted to address it with you guys. She essentially she hadn't trained in a few years, and or maybe like touched on it on and off, but basically she went to this Muay Thai class, and she went a little hard and ended up injuring her back after one class. um, and this is something that I've talked with a lot of my friends about before, and people that I train with and whatnot, and even my own friends and family, that if it's something that I've experienced personally too, which is that if you haven't trained in a while and you come back to it, it is so easy to get injured, and it really kind of fucks with your head a little bit because you're finally over the hump of not being motivated to exercise, and but you're finally mentally ready, right? And then it's almost like the universe sending you a sign that you're just not going to be able to do anything. You're not going to be able to do the thing that you want to do, which is really sad because some of us get into these funks. And I mean, there are more people that I know than I can count that have encountered this before, and it's really difficult to get started back on something that is not necessarily always super easy for everybody. Okay, so to get into this, basically, um, I well, a little backstory, right? I met her at in Thailand, my second trip there. I stayed there for 2 months. There was a lot of drama in terms of me crashing my moped, and then as I was recovering from that, I ended up getting another injury, which I won't get into right now. And so I did end up training a bit, but a lot of things went wrong. But what did happen was I met a group of people that I was training with that we just really clicked and hung out a lot. And so we have this group chat, which was pretty active at the time. And even after we all left, we kind of kept in touch. But over time, eventually, these things kind of die off a little bit if you don't have any direct interactions anymore. So haven't heard from them in ages. We hung out like right before the pandemic. And out of the blue, we get this message from a friend, and then somebody else replies, and somebody else replies, and all of a sudden she's saying like, "Hey guys, this is what happened to me. I took a Muay Thai class after not having done anything in years, and immediately injured my back." And we were like laughing about it, and we'll joke about it because what else can you do, right? But this really made me think about this because I've done the exact same thing where I I was pretty fit before COVID hit, and as the lockdown happens, nobody's allowed to go anywhere really. I did take a lot of walks. I started running, and as soon as I started running, actually, I think I started biking, and there were all these riots happening. Um, and so I kind of stopped going outside because I don't want to get involved in it. Even like the nearby stores right outside were boarded up and whatnot. And so then, you take some time off, you do things at home, but it's really like not that motivating when you're just sitting at home. I just wanted to be outside, right? And I'm not even an outdoorsy person, okay? And then afterwards, And then I motivate myself again. I went on bike rides. I was going on longer and longer rides. I was having a great time, enjoying just the wind in my face type of thing. And then it was like the weather was warming up. It was getting nice. And then all of a sudden, the forest sets on fire. Uh, and essentially, this happened multiple times throughout the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, I'm just like not motivated. I'm cooking and eating a lot and whatnot. And it really kind of got out of shape. And then all of a sudden, I was like, eventually, I'm not used to being that out of shape anymore, since I had been training for years. And so I decided to just do something simple, like the rowing machine, generally pretty safe, okay? But I'm used to being able to row a certain way. And since I hadn't done anything in ages, I mean, I did stretch here and there and I did like little bits of things, but realistically, I really hadn't been moving the way I'm used to moving. And essentially, I did the rowing machine. I didn't even go super hard. I decided to like keep the resistance pretty low. Um, I know better than to go crazy, right? But the one thing that didn't kind of, I guess I just overlooked it, or in the moment it felt okay, which is really the tricky part too in this. Um, while you're going, the excitement of it and whatnot, I didn't feel like anything was wrong. And then afterwards, my right Achilles started bothering me, like right after a little bit after I cooled down and whatnot. And then after that, it got really bad and it was difficult to walk. And then, that means that I couldn't row again, because I would feel it. And then I try to walk and the walking was bothering me. And now pretty much any activity that you use your feet even at all, it would hurt. And so I again would stop exercising and just had to rest it. Um, but that's what, as soon as I saw her message, that's what it kind of reminded me of. So this is what I want to talk about, right? So why is it that why is it that this happens? You know, first of all, this is something that happens all the time. It's not just martial arts, right? Um, the runners deal with this type of thing. I guess like anybody who does any sort of exercise, um, fitness, right? Even if you do plyometrics, weightlifting, um, even walking for elderlies and whatnot can be a thing because supposedly Supposedly, about 40% of exercise related injuries happen during return after inactivity periods, according to the American College of Sports Medicine. Um, my guess is like that would be potentially even more if you like don't include, because it's hard, right? Because exercise related injuries could include pro athletes. Right. So if you take away, I'm like, I don't actually know if they included that in this study, but if you don't include pro athletes, then I feel like it might be even more because, once you get moving, once you're used to moving, a lot of things tend to be okay. Of course, if you're doing martial arts and something more explosive and whatnot, of course, weightlifting too, it could result in injury, right? Um, but why does this happen? Okay. Uh, so looking into my own experience, um, your tendons lose up to 80% of their strength after like 8+ weeks of inactivity. That's 80%. That is huge, which means if you're used to being able to do something, even if you just kind of go like, I'm gonna take it easy, it's still probably too hard. Most people, when it comes to even myself, right? If I say I'm going to take it easy, it means that I'll probably go 20, 30%. Okay. That fits the 80% thing. But as you get excited, things will amp up and there might be like little bits where you have excess energy and you might end up pushing a little bit harder, hitting like your 50, 60, 70% threshold, right? There might be, let's say if I'm doing like 3 rounds of pads and I'm gassing out, right? But even during that, maybe the first round I start pretty easy, and then second round I'm feeling good, I'm moving, and I go a little bit harder, and then eventually I'm too tired to go hard, so I would take it easy anyway, right? But the general thing is that, if you think about it, if you've been doing something for a really long time and then you stop doing it, right? People say like it's like riding a bike. Essentially what it means is that your brain remembers what you used to be able to do. Whether it's a few months ago, a few years ago, right? The memory doesn't we think we lose memory. It's stored there, you just can't recall it. So memory and recalling are two different things. Um, which I don't want to get into here, but basically your brain remembers what to do, but your body doesn't. And well, your brain remembers what it used to be able to do, and your body just can't do it because it's not there. But what also happens is like we call it muscle memory, but really it's like the muscles still take cue from your brain, and essentially your brain tells your muscles, "Hey, this is how we do this." Right? And then you go for it and it feels familiar because when you do something that you used to do, it it kind of it kind of like recalls the all the things that you used to do, similar conditions, similar movements and whatnot. Um, and that familiarity gives you this sense of like this sense of false confidence, right? Because your support tissues, your tendons, your ligaments, your deep stabilizing muscles and whatnot, um, those are not conditioned, right? The deconditioning of your body, your physical being, is much faster than the skills and knowledge that you have worked on. So even when we think I'm gonna take it easy, a lot of times that quote unquote easy mode is still far above what our body can handle after a long break. And I'm not talking about like, yeah, she took a few years off, but like I said, even after what 8 weeks, that's like basically 2, 3 months if you don't do anything. And I will say, like, even normally, if I'm training 4 or 5 times a week, I'm okay. Well, let's say 3 to 4 times a week, I'm okay. 5 to 6 times, I'm doing pretty good. The consistency helps it make it easy to get started and stop. To get started, really, every time, every session. 1 to 2 times a week, barely. And if I take like, really, if I take more than 4 or 5 days off, um, and I come back, I immediately feel it. Not just in the tendons, those kind of take a little bit longer, but like my body itself, it just won't move exactly that same way. It won't get there as fast, and it takes a day to kind of come back. And I feel like every 4 days I take off. It takes an extra day to get back. And so if you take a few weeks off, it probably takes a couple of weeks, at least 2, 3 weeks to get back. And then after that, it's probably about the same, but it'll at least take like 2, 3 weeks to get back to some semblance of being able to even sort of do what you used to do, and then realistically it's going to take a little bit longer. Of course that depends on your age and physical condition, and genetics play a part in it too. Some people are just naturally thin and fit, and even still you're not free you're not free from being injured. That can still happen, but some people genetically have are just built different, right? And then one of the other things that'll happen is, like the thing that I see sometimes too is a lot of senior citizens now are a little bit more aware of the fact that they need to exercise. Um, and so, even watching my own parents, they've never exercised before. Like maybe when they're young, they played a little bit of sports with school or like friends. I'm talking real young, right? Like before they were even adults. But then once they're adults, they just work and do whatever. And so, it just doesn't like really occur. And if you're not an athlete, what are you doing? And exercise, like being fit is almost like a more recent trend. Um, we just have more information available, and now we're like, people aren't drinking as much, well, to a certain degree. But basically, one of the things that I would see with senior citizens, and not just like elderly, um, even like past the 50s and whatnot, right? Like people see one of the things that really troubled me was that I couldn't get them to really exercise. My dad kind of like runs in place, which he thinks is the same as running. It is definitely not. um Still better than nothing, right? But they'll see, like my mom especially will see people on social media, these influencers who are like, honestly, they look like they're barely over 20 years old. um they'll demonstrate these movements that are like really explosive, and all you have to do is make a video and like take clips of what you're doing and then put text over and say like, this will change your life. And especially the older generation, I find that I wouldn't even say they're more gullible. I think they're just not accustomed to the fact that people can just make shit up so fast, and having zero basis that they're able to just post things publicly. Like they're used to, and let's not get into the discussion of, the truth behind news and whatnot, right? But like they're used to publications. They're used to the news and, maybe radio or like somewhat like that. It takes expertise to put content out of some sort, because I've watched people cook on some shows, and they have their own show, and like I watch them and I'm like, you're a terrible cook. Like you would never, I don't know what the hell you're doing, right? But basically they'll like watch these social media influencers do these movements and make these huge claims that it'll give you mobility or like help you gain strength, keep you young, whatever. That one especially, like hitting the older audience or whatnot. And then of course young people would do it and they're like, oh yeah, it totally works. Um, and so then they gain some credibility, and older people will look and see it and it's like, oh cool, people say that it works, right? So clearly it's okay. Without any idea, and that's not on them, you know. Um, about only what? Only like 20-30%, less than a third of fitness influencers have any exercise science credentials. And that's not to say that that makes them, that doesn't necessarily discredit people, right? Like we think about like certifications and licenses and things like that. You can get certified relatively easily. You just pay some money and study a little bit and then answer some questions. And yeah, you'll have some of the knowledge based on study and whatnot, but realistically, in practice, without care and thought and analytical skills and observational skills and the ability to adapt and adjust and actually giving a shit about people, um, you're just gonna say shit without any regard for who gets hurt. And that is pretty dangerous because when it comes to older adults, their motivation just kind of comes later in life, right? Whether they've been fine all their life, they don't do anything crazy, and so they don't play sports or whatnot, so they never had to be fit. They can walk around, they're okay, they're able to take care of themselves, so it's never been a thing until they have like a health scare or something. My mom had like a heart thing, and all of a sudden she's like, okay, I need to really be walking more, even though you've been telling me to exercise. I need to actually do it. My back hurts, this hurts, that hurts. I can't do anything. And I'm like, we do a little bit of an experiment, and after working on certain movements and strengthening certain muscles for a couple of months, she's able to do the things that she couldn't do before. And so then she believes in me finally, right? But really, it's like outside of health scare, maybe things with mobility, like same thing that I'm talking about, or maybe like your doctor tells you and you actually listen to them, they're not really super into it. And so there are a lot of things that they just don't know. And then they're like, okay, I'm just going to look online because there's a lot of information online. There is. And there is a lot of good information online. But it's so hard to parse through it if you don't know what you're looking for already. And they see this like 20-year-old doing these explosive movements and it looks okay because the caption says so. All right. And maybe a couple of people comment saying that it's okay. But they have older joints, um, reduced bone density, slower reaction time, and lack of training and understanding of how the body works. Um, and, they're just way more likely to be injured. And that's just really, it's just unfortunate because you started late. It's not your fault. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But like, everybody kind of knows exercise is good for you. Everybody, most people don't necessarily believe that it's that necessary. Like, you're fine. That's the general thought. I'm fine. I'm fine without it. I've been fine without it for decades. All of a sudden, it's an issue. Well, it's kind of always been an issue. Um, but late's better than never. And then all of a sudden, you're getting hurt. And what happens when you're older and get injured? Even now, for me, an injury that used to last a week, 2 weeks, now lasts a month, 2 months. And I'm not exactly a senior citizen, so I can't even imagine what it'll be like in another 10, 20 years. Um, so let's come back to what to actually do then, right? Let's think about um, what do we do if we are coming back to training after a while off, whether it was like due to injury or just life shit happening. Something set you off course, right? So you're coming back into it. The idea is to really reduce everything down to like 20, 30%, maybe even 10%, depending on the movement. Um, if you are generally not super flexible and some of the movement require a little bit of flexibility, if you just haven't been moving this way, if you've been sitting at your desk, if you've been sitting on the couch, if you've been laying around, you've not been moving that way, then start. When they say start slow, it's not just speed. Slow the speed down. Reduce the range of motion, right? even when I'm doing dynamic stretches at the beginning, the reason why I like it is that if you start at a lesser range of motion and you move and you feel it out, you can kind of feel where your limitation hits, and you can kind of, and as you move, that limitation kind of moves a little bit because your joints warm up, gets a little more lubricated, um, and then you'll kind of hit that limit again, and then you're pretty much there. And that way you know where it is. Are you going to be able to control it perfectly to stop yourself from getting hurt? Maybe not, but having that information in your mind, at least your brain knows that it's there, and the hope is that it'll make the adjustment that it needs to as you're going, as long as you are not pushing yourself too hard. And we'll kind of get back to that a little bit, right? So you adjust weight or resistance. If you are lifting, start super, super light. You know, if you think it's too light, maybe even go a little bit lighter. Just to start, just to move and see how things feel. Um, and I don't just mean like do one rep and you're like, I can handle more and just go on. Just do it at, if you're used to lifting like 40, 50 pounds on something, maybe get it down to just grab a 5 pound weight and do that and just go through the reps and do whatever it is, right? If you're used to kicking really hard, just kick really, really light. Slow it down, slow down the speed, lessen the range of motion, lessen the power or the weight or resistance, whatever it is. Break down the motion to the most basic form so that you're not dealing with the complexity of how you're used to being able to execute something, and reduce the volume. First day, everything down. Second day, maybe still the same thing. Just so that you have time to kind of suss things out. Suss out your body. How did it respond the first day to working at 10%, 20%? Now do the same thing again. Is your body still reacting the same way? If it is, maybe it can handle a little bit more. But if you feel okay during it, because that's also what she was saying, was that while she was training she was fine, and then afterwards her back really started hurting, is that during the movement your body's warmed up. And also there's adrenaline when you're, especially if you're like doing contact sports, contact or combat sports, but combat sports especially, where there's a lot of adrenaline going on. And generally, if you're doing Muay Thai or HIIT or whatever, it's also like a HIIT workout. And so there's so much movement going on. It's generally pretty explosive. Um, but yeah, if let's say you're used to being able to throw head kicks, let's just start with the leg kicks, start with some mid kicks, and do a few squats, do things at body weight. Don't worry about the resistance yet. Just get into the motion, and maybe if you feel good the first week, next week go up to 30%. All right, 40%. Maybe. Just maybe go up like 10%. And of course our bodies aren't like a machine that you can just dial, and so, the percentage is a little bit, I guess, relevant to each person, but ultimately be really honest with yourself, right? If you're like, yeah, I'm going at 20%, but you're not, you're going 50%, just scale it back. Um, and then, don't go until you're exhausted. There's no point. I went on this run the other day because I'm like, okay, I'm finally ready to run again. My knees feel a lot better. Everything's okay. And I'm going and I'm like, all right, even a walk run, which like with a warm up and a cool down at like 45, 50 minutes. It was pretty long and my back was sore. Um, no, I didn't actually injure anything, luckily, because I have been moving, somewhat at least. But even that, I felt something. And so realistically, I probably should have gone like 35, 40 minutes, scale it back even a little bit more, and then ramp up on it. But, you know, that's why I'm saying it's like I understand the desire to kind of push a little bit more, push a little bit more, especially if you're used to training. Um, you know, I don't necessarily feel embarrassed doing beginner stuff, but I know other people do, you know? I've talked to other people, I've talked to people I've trained with, people I just like ran into at, at gyms or whatnot, and they're like, man, I used to be able to do this, and I can't do it. I have to like do this thing. Ugh. And sometimes it's like, oh, I'm watching all these people do all these things that I used to be able to do, and I can only do this, and they feel bad about it. Like maybe it's embarrassment, maybe it's just like disappointment, whatever it is, right? And some people don't want to look weak. Um, you kind of want your old version back, but I'm not. Like I started training in mid 30s, which wasn't super young to begin with, and I was already, starting to get a decent amount of injuries. Um, because I'm used to be able to do stuff the way I did stuff in varsity, playing varsity sports, and even playing college sports. And now in the 30s, I couldn't do it, and then a long break and coming back, and it's taken a long time. Yeah, I could have probably pushed a little bit more. Um, in terms of pacing and really ramping up. But there's other things going on in life. Like most of us aren't professional athletes and don't dedicate our entire life to exercise and training. And you have to work, you have to deal with family, friend stuff, support your friend, support your people, right? Um, Financial things or just things falling apart. Computers break, technology, any sort of technology breaks, things break around the house, you have to fix things. You just life gets in the way, right? And so taking our time is just difficult. And you want to get back to who you were as quickly as possible, but things getting in the way can, like that frustration, the additional frustration of not being able to dedicate the time that you want to dedicate because you could be back to where you were a lot faster if you could dedicate, but you're like, my washing machine broke. Or, I mean, mine took like 4 months to get sorted out. And that, you know, these things, additional stress, outside stress will have the same issue. Um, and if you're in combat sports, if you're doing Muay Thai, if you're doing kickboxing, if you're doing jujitsu, which I don't, am barely able to get into, um, you know, a lot people who train martial arts do a lot of reps of the same thing, right? Like how many jabs have you thrown? If you're boxing, if you're kickboxing, if you're doing Muay Thai, how many kicks have you thrown? And you do the same thing over and over and over again. Your body knows what to do. But normally, if you're not training, all you're doing is walking and sitting and standing. And now, if you're getting back into it, there, your body is you're dealing with rotational force, right? Explosive movements in the hips. Um, you're pushing your mobility to the end of its range. You need to be able to work on your balance. A lot of things are high impact. All of these things will really push your body to the limit. Stress the exact issues where that the parts of your body that's weakened the most during those long breaks, those movements really stress those exact spots in your body. Um, and so the idea is kind of to think about rebuilding, like, I mean, I wouldn't call it Lego set. Somebody was like comparing it to like rebuilding a new engine, and not just like pushing an old one, right? But like realistically, like your body's not an engine. It doesn't run the same. All I can say is like the main goal, the main focus is to not try to prove that you are still good at this thing that you used to be good at. You got to know that you can be good again, but trying to get back to the same spot you were at years ago is not really really helpful, and of course if you're only taking a break for a few months, but like, if it's an injury break, if it's even if it's a mental break, um your body changes, and it's just going to take time to one is going to take extra time to get back the older you get, and two, you may not get back to the way you were. Things just change. Mentality change, your body changes, the way it moves. um Shorter breaks might be lesser of an impact, but if you had an injury and you recover, your body's going to move slightly differently, especially if it's significant enough to stop you. I mean, otherwise, like, most of us deal with injuries all the time. Something hurts, but for the most part, you can kind of work around it, right? But then something like a tear, it's not something that you can kind of just work through. Maybe towards the end of it, you can start doing like PT and whatnot and start getting back into training if you're going super easy. But the worst part is healing an injury for 2 months, feeling like okay, getting started again, going a little bit too hard, and then re injuring it. And then it takes even longer to heal because it's already been fucked up. Okay. Um, so really the key takeaway is, one, I feel for her. It's difficult to finally feel ready to do something that you haven't been mentally ready for in a long time. And you get back to it, you're excited, right? And you hurt yourself and then you can't do it anymore, and it almost feels like it's a sign, but it's not. I mean, it is. It's not a sign that you shouldn't be doing this. It's a sign that it's okay to take it slower. And, whether whether or not people around you judge you, I'm not going to sit here and say like nobody's going to judge you. People judge. Not a big deal, you know. Everybody judges, and that's okay. If you go back into something and you're like, oh yeah, I used to do this thing, and you do it, and people are watching, you're like, you don't look like you used to do this thing. Well, you know what? Who fucking gives a shit? Because it's not about what they think. Okay, it doesn't fucking matter. All right, you're doing the best that you can. Maybe you should do a little bit less than the best that you can, because doing the best that you can could potentially hurt you, right? So we're trying to really give yourself a lot of grace here when you're coming back. Um, really take the time. Start from almost nothing. Check in with your body, especially if you're older, but even if you're in your 30s, your body starts falling apart. I feel like after your 20s, that's pretty much it. It's just an entire downhill slow descent. Like snowboarding on a bunny slope. You know, you're just slowly sliding down, but you are not going back up unless something pulls you back up, which in life there is none because time doesn't go backwards, right? So ignore anybody who's judging you because fuck them. Because one day they're gonna go through the same shit. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe not. Some people never go through anything. Good for them, right? But if they do, they're gonna judge themselves the same way they judge you, and that's gonna be punishment enough. Um, but if you're giving yourself a hard time, I mean, I would say don't, but it's not as easy as it sounds. You know, you're used to thinking certain ways and whatnot. So even if you are judging yourself, take it slow. Dial it back. Dial the power back, dial the speed back, dial the range back, dial the complexity back, dial the time back, the reps back, dial everything back. Even if you're judging yourself, even if you feel embarrassed, dial everything back. Even if it sucks that you have to do it over and over again because you dialed it back and you slowly ramped up and then you get injured again or something else comes up and you have to take another break and you have to start all over again. You start it all over again, dial it back. It sucks. No one's gonna say it's not. Some people say it's like, oh, it's okay, you know, blah blah blah. It's difficult, okay? Not gonna sugarcoat it. It is difficult. But there is really no way around it. And if you try, yeah, maybe you'll get lucky, but if you don't, it's gonna suck even worse. And with that, that's gonna be the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week.